what appears to be the majority of people on social media, but I'm convinced it's probably the minority, but still. And I'm not making the case that we're like all narcissists. It just seems as if we are, like prioritizing vanity, and when it comes to like virtues, they're like completely in the back seat. And this video is going to require lots of nuance, right? Because I know I'm gonna get, well, actually, Danny, that you're trying to say this, or actually, like, I already know I'm gonna get a bunch of straw mans and stuff like that. So I hope to be clear and concise when I deliver this message. We have like Get Ready With Me, we have vlogs, we have reviews, we have streaming where you can watch people do life. We have fitness, fashion, money, we have looks maxing, which is a thing now. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with any of those. Obviously, I think you should try to look good, you should try to get in shape, you should try to save your money, you should try to strive for more. I think the problem is when the self becomes the center of everything that we do, and it's like, how can I be better? How can I look better? How can I make more money? How can I get more clicks? How can I get more attention? I think when you focus on those questions, I think that can be problematic. So the problem isn't that you take care of yourself. I think the problem is when you believe that you are the center of the universe. And some people can build their entire identity on their looks, how much money they make, their social status, their height. I mean, not me, your boy's 5'6", so I'm not really putting much stock in the height department, But all those things can become vanity, completely chasing the wind, meaningless. And for the second time in this video, I'm not saying that they're inherently bad. I just believe that they can be temporary. So for example, let's say you are so focused on how you look, and looking the absolute best is your identity. Let's say something tragic happens, you get in a car accident, now your face is permanently changed. What happens to that identity? Maybe you're obsessed with how tall you are. Have you ever met someone where they base their entire personality on how tall they are? Let's say they're paralyzed. What now? Because you can lose your ability to walk, you can lose all your money, you can lose your talents, you can lose your status. Yeah, I'm a proud father, I'm a proud husband, but I can be a widower tomorrow. You know what I mean? So I can't place my entire identity in those things. God has given me those roles to steward, obviously, but I know those identities can be taken away from me. So I have a humble posture, and I'm blessed to take on those roles. I also think part of the problem is sometimes we don't live in reality. We want to live in a world where it's constantly entertainment, partying, hot girl summers, bachelor parties, hedonism. But the nuance is, obviously, I think you should still go out. You should still have fun. I'm not saying you can't have fun. Go out, travel, make some good memories. We just have to be careful, because I think we can chase those things when we are trying to escape reality. And that's not good. But I get it, because reality isn't always so fun. Reality has funerals, hospital visits, suffering, miscarriages, responsibility. And sometimes it includes things that we never asked for. There's a time for everything, a time to mourn, time to laugh, time to suffer, a time to rejoice. And having said that, I still think living in reality is the best option. Because you just can't build a meaningful life when you're constantly avoiding the truth. And this is why I believe the Christian worldview offers something so beautiful. But don't log off if you're not a Christian, or if you got that weird Christian friend that's always trying to send you things, trying to convert you. Hold on, chill. Let me just share with you what the Christian lens looks like when it comes to identity. Because right now in this world, identity is a huge, touchy subject. The Christian sees their identity in something that nobody can take away. Not my face, not my beard, not my money, not my talents, not my dance skills, not my writing skills, none of that. My number one identity is in Christ. The nuance here is that, obviously, I'm not saying that none of those things matter. Yeah, I take care of myself still. Yes, I still develop skills, still work hard. Yeah, I can try to be more attractive, but none of those things are now the foundation of who I am anymore. Because now, if I believe Christ is the center of my life, I don't have to impress you guys on being awesome. But it's different, and it freaks me out, because now I just have this humble posture towards the gifts that I've been given, because I know that God can remove them. So instead of asking, like, how can people admire me, I'm thinking, well, how can I serve people? How can I love on others? How can I love my enemies? How can I love you right now if you disagree with what I'm saying? you know? And now this is where I make my argument that I believe the greatest love is sacrificial love. This is what I think a lot of people, including yourself, you might have forgotten. We think love is how someone makes us feel or how we can maximize our happiness. That's love, apparently. But if you put on the Christian lens, love is completely different. Christ-like love is sacrificial love. And that thing that upsets us or inconveniences us, or that, you know, those things that bother us can be methods to make us more Christ-like. Can be is the key word. You know, maybe you're impatient. I'm impatient, and then God sent me my wife. Then I learned how to be patient. You know, maybe life doesn't always go according to your plan. I'm not saying that every single painful thing that happened in your life was God. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that He can use those moments of suffering, those trials, to shape you and mold you. I do believe that. And that's why maybe sacrifice is something that's forming you. And you might be saying, well, don't you got to take care of yourself? Don't you don't want to neglect yourself. And what if you're on an airplane? You got to make sure that you have the oxygen on before you have others. Like, I've heard this analogy. I get it. Obviously, take care of yourself. But there's a difference between taking care of yourself as a responsibility versus taking care of yourself because you're the center of your life. But I don't think that my life is ultimately about me. But I find that freeing. Because here's the irony, is that we think freedom is do whatever you want. If I asked you what is freedom, most people would say, well, it's to do whatever I want. Okay, well, plan out your day for me. Well, maybe sleep in, watch some Netflix, maybe doom scroll, maybe go get some pizza, hang out with friends, probably take the day off from work. That's, and if that's not you, that's fine, but that sounds like something I would do. But the next day, I know deep down, that wasn't me being free. I probably didn't want that. That wasn't truly me. I just know that. That was my laziness. That was my desires that I had. But let's say every desire you have is satisfied. Every inconvenience is avoided. Let's say that happens. Every feeling you have is obeyed. Let's just say that. You live your life always perfect 70 degrees. Then who's actually in control? Is it you or is that your desires? And for like the 50th nuance in this, I'm not saying all desires are bad. Obviously, you have a desire to sleep. You have a desire to rest. You have the desire to eat. Those aren't bad at all. I just think when your desires become your master, this is where C.S. Lewis discusses like the belly. And one of my favorite quotes I wrote down a couple years ago speaks on this. So you satisfy your lust, gluttony, envy, rage, sense of victimization. What makes you think that those aren't gods that are ruling you? You think that's you and your freedom? Why aren't you just in the grips of a lesser devil? I just love that quote. And I would tell you who wrote it, but I feel like most people would overthink it and be like, well, that doesn't count because that person wrote it. So I'll just leave you guessing that. And this thing terrifies me because I know that as a man, if I allow these things to control me, I am doomed. And I really think real freedom is the ability to say no and being disciplined. That's why discipline equals freedom. That's why everyone says that. That's why you see these quotes on Insta of people saying that because it's true. So obviously pursue things. I'm not saying don't pursue things and just sit there. But just ponder, think about what are those things that I'm pursuing ultimately for? And that's why the Christian worldview is pretty radical because it's teaching us how can we align in the Imago Dei? How can we be more Christ-like? Really, really not trying to sound arrogant or weird about it, but I really think that we are trying to become our own gods. We are trying to pursue everything that we want. And I just see that as a moral decline. And it's wild to me because like the human heart is still not in control. We have AI, we have billionaires, we have DoorDash, you have everything at your fingertips. We can get everything we want. Well, it's the illusion that we can get everything we want. And it's also the illusion of not having to wait for anything, right? But we're still taking each other out. We're still angry. We still have road rage. We don't even want to get even. We want to inflict. We're malicious in our hearts. So it's like, how far has society even came? So I said a lot in this video. But yeah, let me know if you disagree or your thoughts or anything that I can help explain more in depth. But that's what I believe is true. Have a good one, guys.